So we have an add new album. Right? So we can get to these pages. You know, I'm logged in, I have my add link. What about if I grab this URL? So I'm logged in my Firefox, but let's say I skip over to Chrome. When I try to go to album details in Chrome, what should happen? So I'm logged in Firefox, I haven't logged in Chrome. Okay. So what we should be doing on this page is checking if the user's logged in, and if they're not logged in, right, we should kick them back to the home page, right? So most sites where we have to authenticate work like this, right? I'm logged in here in Firefox in Blackboard, but if I copy that URL and try to load the same page up over in Chrome, right, I have no active session. Chrome doesn't know who I am, so it kicks me out and asks me to authenticate myself before it shows me the page. So we didn't quite get to finish this part. We added authentication code here so that we could determine whether to show users the links, but we never actually locked our details page, did we? Or our delete page. So we could still go to those pages if we knew the URLs, or maybe we saw them in the browser history, we could still go there without logging in. So let's deal with that first. Then we also should add a log out ability, right? So when someone's done, they can kill their session so no one else can go in with their login. So let's open up our album details page. So here's how the page looks. Right? So in the middle, we've got our HTML form, and up at the top, we have our PHP code that is checking for an album ID in the URL. If there's an album ID, we're going to query the database and look that album up so we can populate our page. So right now, this page is public. If we put it up on Azure or on DreamHost, anybody anywhere can go to that page and start putting stuff in our database if they want, right? So what things should we do here to change this page, move it from a public page like it is now? We want to convert it into a private page. So somebody has to log in and have an active session in order to be able to load this page. So we probably need about 5 or 6 lines of code. What things? Block of code. Nikita?
If checks the session already has a user ID, it doesn't just redirects the user back to the login page.
Right. So just kind of reviewing how our login worked. Right, we created this page back a few weeks ago. This was when you had some of the code up on the wall outside and you guys were running back and forth to try and finish the page. By the way, I know I owe some people coffee. Can't remember who that is, but you probably emailed me. So remember, when we tried to verify a user login, and if password verify was true, here's what we did. We called session start, and then we took their user ID from the database and we stored it in a session variable with the same name. Why did we do this? Why did we need these 2 lines of code? If their password and username were valid, why didn't we just take them right to the albums page? Why do we need this code on line 18 and line 19? So someone gave us a good username and good password. They want to go to the albums page. So we're taking them off the albums page here. What's the point of this stuff?
So the user ID variables that you have something to check against.
Right. Before we leave this page, we need to store that user's identity. Why are we going to use the session to store them? Why don't we just store them in a regular PHP variable? Right, because a local variable, like $session user ID, it only lives on this page. As soon as the user leaves, we're going to lose that variable. By using the session travels around with the user, so they can go on different pages, and we always know who they are. Like they're kind of like their passport that they're keeping in their pocket and can be checked at any time. So we're going to want to, on our details page, we're going to want to call session start because we can't check the session unless we call session start first. And then we can check this value and see whether that is empty or not empty. If there is a valid user ID in the session, it means this person's logged in, they have an active session that hasn't timed out, and we'll just let them see the album details page for adding or editing. If this value is empty, we're going to do what Raj said. We're going to take them back to the login page, just like we saw on Blackboard, right? When I tried to access a page when I wasn't logged in. So on our album details, right here at the top, do is put on some PHP tags. The very first line, I'm going to use OB start. How come? Why would we need OB start in this file? We've added OB start to a few other files before, not all of them, but some of them. When do we add it? If something might happen on this page.
We need to redirect the page. We need to use it.
Exactly. Thanks. So if we're going to use, remember, if the user's not logged in, we want to redirect them to the login page. And if we don't, any page where we might be calling header location, we need to start with OB start. Otherwise, their web server might throw us that cannot redirect HTTP headers already sent error. So we're going to access the user session by calling session start. We want to check the session. If we don't call session start, we're not able to check for any variables held inside of the session. So what function, how can we now check the session to see if there's a user ID in it or not? So we want to access this variable in blue and determine if it has a value. So we basically need about 3 lines here to do that check.
Can we check if the variable is empty?
Sure. So we'll say, we use our empty function that we've been using for validation. So if that variable is empty, that means either this user either hasn't logged in or they've logged in but their session has expired. So we no longer know who it is. So what do we do in this case? How do we take them back to the login page?
We create a link to the login page.
Well, if we wanted them to click it, we would use a link, but we don't want them to have to click it. You're on the right track, Brad, but we want to send them automatically. So, Brinder?
Use the header.
Right. With header location. And then just to be sure the rest of the page, nothing else happens, we can call exit. Now, if the user ID is not empty, that's fine. Then our page just carries on. The user gets to see this page. So this is our auth check. If we have OB start at the top, what do we need at the very bottom of the file? Thank you, Brinder. So at the very bottom, after our last HTML tag, we'll call OB flush. Now, we don't need OB start and OB flush if the user's logged in because this page won't do a redirection. It'll just load, but having them there won't cause a problem. Doesn't break anything. Better to have them there in case an unauthorized user tries to get in here and we have to redirect them. So now if I reload this file in my two browsers, we should get a different behavior.
Could you just go back up to the top, please? I just want to make sure that, okay, yeah, I just need to add the coding to line data.
So try your album details page out again. Try it first in a browser where you're logged in, then try it in a different browser or a private window where you're not logged in. So let's try it. So I can, in Firefox where I'm logged in, now I can get to my album details page. But if I refresh this in Chrome where I'm not logged in, notice we're not logged in because all my buttons are missing. If I refresh here, now it kicks me to the login page. So that page is now secured. The only way to get at this page is to log in properly.
So we know your username, but did we have to create usernames for each of us?
Yeah, because that's only going to work for me on my server. So if you don't remember the username you created, it was 3 weeks ago. So in fairness, I forgot mine. Your page and create a new user. So really, any page that should be private should have this same code at the top and the OB flush at the bottom. The very top, before anything happens on this page, we should be checking if the user is authenticated, and if not, let's leave. So which other pages should be private in our site? You can see the directory tree here on the left. This is one private page, but there are some others. Have a look at the list. What other pages should only an authenticated user be able to access?
We take the first strike and we appreciate your assistance.
Okay. Yeah, delete. If we're not going to let an anonymous user add, we probably don't want anonymous users deleting data. So what we can do is we can just grab that same script from the top of album details. We'll copy it. And well, we already have an OB start at the top of delete because it already uses header location. We don't need it twice, but we want that same check at the top.
Right, so the one we just had the OB start and flush to, that was album details.
Yes.
Albums.php.
Not albums. Albums is a public page. So it needs to be on album details. It should be on delete album. Anywhere else, any other pages that only authenticated users should be able to access? What other page have we built that makes changes to our database? There's the details page, there's the delete page, there's one more. Do any changes happen on this page? Right. And what page is that? Well, we can see it if just by viewing the source of the page. What's the name of the file that processes our form submissions, either for adding a new album or for editing an existing one? Yeah, our save page has both code for inserting and updating. Again, we don't want to let anonymous users do either of those things. So our save page also needs that same code at the top. So we'll paste it at the top, and we need an OB flush at the bottom. So save, our form, and our delete page are all now private. Now we've repeated a bunch of code here, which isn't great. We'll make some changes to this today to reduce some of the duplication. So all those pages are private now, which is what we want. We have a public version of the albums page, but users can only see the data. They can't make any changes. They can't add, they can't modify, they can't delete. So we have options. We have full flexibility when we're securing things. We can make a page public, but make parts of it private or hidden. Or we could make an entire file like this one. We can make the entire page private. Right at the top, if you're not logged in, we won't let you see it. And most pages tend to be more like this. Usually users can't even get in to see a certain file or even a certain folder and any of the files inside. One other page we're going to make, which is really simple. We've allowed users to sign up and log in here, and I don't want my session to stay active. What do we typically do when we're done after we've logged into a site and we're done with that site? What should you do? Right, we should log out. Right now, I only have one way to log out. How can I log out? Yeah, I have to close the entire browser. Even to close these tabs, watch what happens. I can close the tabs, but so long as the browser's still open, if I go back to my albums, right, my session's still active because I still have add, edit, and delete visible to me. So even closing the tabs isn't enough. I'd have to close my browser entirely, which I don't want to do because then I have to log back into Blackboard. So we should, if we're going to ask users to log in, we need to give them a way to log out. So someone else can't come use their device and have access to the application. So let's just add a link here. We'll just put it for now here, and then we're going to build a navigation bar next. But let's just add a little link. So on your albums page, we've already got a link here that says, if the user's logged in, show this link. Let's just print another one right below it. We'll create a link that goes to logout.php and says logout. And we'll build this logout page in a minute. It's really simple. A few lines of PHP code, and it's just a hidden page. Logs the user out and takes them back to the home page.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand out of the new coding that we have to certain pages, which ones were needed for which, because basically I've got all of that coding minus the links for the save albums and delete albums.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, maybe I'll ask you later.
Okay. So I've just added a standard HTML link here. When I refresh my list of albums, I now get, whoops, doesn't look very good. I should at least put a space there so I can see it. I know it doesn't look great. That's okay. We're going to move this and make it look better in a minute. If I click log out right now, what's going to happen? Right? 404, we're linking to a page that doesn't exist. So let's build our logout page. Let's talk about what should happen. Code would be pretty simple. What things are we going to need on this page? Okay, that'll be the very last step. Yep. When it's all done, we can either redirect to login or to the home page, either one. Doesn't matter which one you want to redirect to. Make sure the user is actually logged out. So if they leave that computer and someone else comes to that device, then and tries to go and modify albums, they're locked out and forced to log in again. So what else do we have to do? Yeah, we're going to have to kill the user's session and then redirect them second. Okay. So let's make a new file, new PHP file called logout. We don't actually need any HTML tags on this page. It's much like our delete page. It just runs some PHP code and redirects. So because we're going to redirect, what needs to go on line 1? Yeah, we need OB start at the top. And at the bottom, we need OB flush. We only need one set of PHP tags on this page because there is no HTML. The whole thing is one big block of PHP code. So if we put in our comments, we'll have to terminate the user session. Do we redirect to our default page or to our login page? Sorry? Default, okay. You can choose to redirect wherever you like, doesn't really matter. So before we can, well, we'll try it like this and we'll see what happens. The redirect part is simple, right? Header, location. Maybe I'll just say default. So now I want you to find the name of the function we need that will cancel the user session. So that user ID we're putting in the session variable, that value, and any other variables we put in the session, because we might store other things. What other values besides, we're only storing the user ID, but what other values might we store in the session when someone logs in? So as they move through the site, we always have access to those values. What else might we want to know besides someone's ID number?
Their username?
Yeah, maybe their username, right? When you log into Blackboard, many sites do this. Facebook does the same thing, right? As we navigate around in Blackboard, right, there's our username. They don't want to go and look up the username and query your username on every page. So it's probably stored in the session when you log in. So it can just be printed here on every page. So we might have a username. We definitely want the ID. Anything else? What else would Blackboard store when somebody logs in so that it knows on every single page, it knows this information without having to query the database on every page? Could be, although primarily we need the password just for logging in, right? Once you've logged in, probably your password isn't that important at that point. But I could think there's something else very important.
Could be student number?
Could be, yep. Although that's probably using that as the ID, right? Because that's what you log in is with your username. You're getting warmer. Well, here's a clue. Does your Blackboard look the same as mine if we're looking at the same page? How does Blackboard know if we navigate through click the exact same series of links in our course together? How does Blackboard know on every page that the stuff it shows you is different from what it shows me? Exactly. It stores your role or your membership in a particular group. right? So when you log into Blackboard, it's storing your ID, which might be your student number. It stores your name in a session variable. It also stores your role or your permission level, so that they don't have to check on every single page in the database, what is this user allowed to do? That identity kind of travels around with you, all of those things. So when we remove the session, any variables that have been put into the session, they all will get removed all at once. So maybe not just the ID, but maybe the username, the role, everything else. So I want you to take a minute and see if you can find what function we need here. What's the name of the PHP function that will get rid of that current session? And then we'll try this out. We may have to add a couple more things, but we'll try a really simple version first and see how it works. So you're looking for a function that terminates or ends a session in PHP. If you think you found it, let me know. All right, well, that's right. I heard from 3 of you. So we had session start. There are little code prompts are helpful. If I start typing session in PHP Storm, it brings up all of the session functions. So we'll call session destroy. So let's try this out. The way we'll know if this works, if we log in and then log out and then go back to our albums page, if our links and buttons are hidden, well, our session's gone. If our links and buttons are still there, then we have some more work to do because we're not fully logged out. So let's see what happens. So I'm logged in. I'll just refresh, right? Because I've got my ad, I've got log out, I've got my buttons. And I click log out. Takes me here. So the redirect worked, but are we really logged out? Yes or no? We don't know yet. Not quite. Now, there's nothing wrong with our code. Our session destroy, that is the function we actually need. But obviously, that's not all we need, right? Because we're still logged in here. If we'd properly been logged out, these links would have been turned invisible, and these columns would be invisible. Any thoughts on why this didn't work or what else we're going to need to do here?
Well, we built the session by really clear the user ID from the variable. It still knows it's there.
Okay, so there is a function that removes all session variables. And if we start typing in our code editor, you're going to find it. It's actually in the list that's visible. Which of these functions do we want to call?
Session stop, and then figure it out.
Okay, good point. So we should try. So you said session unset, right? Session unset will remove the variables. So let's try that. But you're right, we may even need session start first, which seems weird. We have to call start before we can call destroy. We'll try it with session unset. And if this doesn't work, then we know we're also going to need session start first. Good guess. So it's interesting that calling session destroy looks like it may not have actually removed the variables. Again, so now I log out. And again, we go back to albums. And I'm still logged in. So I think you're right. We have to access the current session in order to delete it. Even though we want to end the user session, strangely, we have to call session start first. If we try now, we should be successfully logged out. We'll give it a shot. I'll log out one more time. And that did the trick, right? Our add, edit, delete is gone. I'm not actually sure if we need unset. I'm going to comment it out and we'll see. We know we certainly need session start, right? The session destroy doesn't do anything without calling session start first. If I log back in, we'll try. I'm logged in, I log out. So the unset wasn't the problem. Calling destroy did actually remove the session variables. So we can do this if we want to be extra certain, but we don't need to. As long as we call start first and then destroy, the user's been logged out properly. So this logout page, this is pretty much the only PHP logout page we're ever going to need. We don't really have to do anything else. There's no HTML. We could move this and copy this file into many different PHP sites. It's going to work for us. The only thing we ever have to change is which are we redirecting to in this site. Maybe it's login, maybe it has a different file name or file extension for our home page. So part of your second assignment, which I'll give out next week, there'll be a login, log out. You can just use this page. It's fine. It's fine that everybody has the exact same login page. It's not plagiarism. There's nothing else you need here for log out. Okay. So now we've got it kind of fully secured. We can log people out. Our save, our form, and our delete pages are private. So everything we wanted to do around authentication is secure. The only thing I don't really like is we've duplicated all of this code. We also don't have any kind of header and footer on our application. So the rest of our class, we're going to kind of do two things today. The first one is we're going to solve that problem about we've got this duplicate code that we really only want to write one time and reuse. We also want to have a common header and footer so we can change those things in one place, have a navigation bar. And we want that navigation bar to change. So let's look at our pages for a minute. We've got really 4 public pages, right? We've got this page that you can see if you're not logged in. We've got this one. We have register. And we have login. So I'll just make a quick list here. Right, so for public, here are the pages. We've got default, albums, register, and login. Private, albums is kind of both public and private. It's still visible to and we have album details. We'll leave the save and the delete out because those pages aren't visible anyway. Users don't actually see them. So we don't need to worry about like a header and footer on those pages because they're invisible. Same with logout. So what we want to do is build a navigation bar. When somebody is not logged into the site, we want these 4 pages to be links in our header, right? An anonymous user should be able to go to any one of these 4 pages. We don't want to show them any kind of link to that as well. When they are, so if this is kind of what our navigation will look like when someone's not logged in, what links should be there when a user logs in? What pages what links should they see in the header?
default albums and references.
Okay, so default albums. Yeah, so the album details, that link might say add an album. And also when you're logged in, we also want to have one other link show up. What other link? Yeah, we also want log out. There's no point putting a logout link for an anonymous user, but once they log in, we should give them a logout link. So we're going to build a header that we're going to share among all the files, but we're going to have some logic in here so the links on it are going to change depending if our users have logged in. We also want a footer at the bottom of the site, bottom of the page that's shared. What are some of the benefits? Why don't we just put all, like the navigation bar on the top of each page? Why would we create a separate header and separate footer and just link those? There's a few reasons we might create headers and footers as separate files and link them in.
When you want to change it, it's saying you see once.
Yeah.
Change the main website.
Right. We never really want to write, if all those pages are going to share the same header and footer, much like with a CSS file, we're not going to write all the style rules on every page. We're going to put it in a separate CSS file and link it to every page. So if to change the CSS, we just change that one file. Same thing with our headers and footers. So almost every website you go to every day, it's not one complete page you're looking at. On the very first day of class, remember we kind of looked at, I'll keep returning here. One of the very first conversations we had in this class was what on this page was static and what was dynamic, right? What things don't change as I click on links and go to different pages? What things do we expect to be the same? Header and, right, everything from here on down. We want to write those things one time and just share them. And every site you go to is like this. Right? We have a header, we have a footer that's shared, and then the content that changes in between. So we want to change our site so that we're splitting it up, and every page is really a combination of 3 partial pages. A header at the top, a footer at the bottom, and then the actual page content in the middle. So that's where we're going, and that's what we want to do. So not only can these, if we're going to share things, can they be visual elements like a footer, but we also can share logic and code between files, so we only have to write it in one place. Right? Look at our album details, the code we wrote at the top, and our delete album. So we've got this same block of code here to these pages, as well as on our save, all 3. So what could we do to make this more efficient? We could create a function, so that's one way of doing it. Yep. What would be the other way we could do it? Similar to creating a function, so that we only have to write this code one time and it could be shared by all 3 of these pages, right? 1, 2, 3. And any other new pages we add to the website that we also want to make private. We don't want to repeat this code. Think about how we share CSS in a web page. How is CSS written once and shared among multiple pages? Yeah, we just link in that external file. So what we can do, just like we can link in a CSS file, we can link one PHP file that just has code in it to another. So we're going to take this code out of here, put it in its own file, and then just link it into any page that needs to be private. So if we want to write more private pages, we just add in that link. Now we've also been doing this for 6 weeks, right? We've been writing this line over and over and over again. And I made you do it just so that we'd get used to it. realistically, how many times should we have our database connection in one website? One time, right? So we want to put that in a separate file and just link that file into all the pages that need to use the database. So there's a few benefits of doing this. Well, one, it's less work because we only have to write that code one time. What would some of the other benefits be of taking our connection string and putting it off in a separate file that we just link in wherever we need it? There's a couple other reasons why we would want to do it, aside from the fact that it's just less work. Yeah, right? If we only have to type it once, it's easier to get it right once than it is to get it right 100 times if we have 100 pages. So it reduces the chances for an error. Okay, yeah, we're only connecting when we need it. Will your database connection ever change? What would be a scenario where something in the database connection would change? So we built a website today. We connect to the database, we put it up online. That website gets used, our client is happy with it, they use it for a while. And at some point, there can be various things that will happen where we're gonna have to go in and change this file. Change it, it's better if we only have it once rather than 100 times or 500 times. What are some reasons why we might have to change information about our database connection? I can think of 3 common reasons. Right, we changed the server. So we don't want to host it on with that database server anymore. Or the hosting company says, that server's old, we're moving it to a new server. Both of those things happen, so you're gonna have to change your connection. You think of any other common business reasons why we might have to change the database? Okay.
So like if you're failing that system fails the database, you can have some alternate connection.
Yeah, okay, so we have an outage and we need to move it to a different server. That happens. What else could happen where we would want to change the database connection? Sorry? Okay, well, there's a couple times where as the developer, we're going to want to change the database username and password. Why would we ever want to change it? I can think of 2 good reasons, and I've experienced both of them. Yeah, if your database or the server gets compromised, you have a responsibility to reset those credentials, right? So if you change it in the database, you have to change it in your PHP code. Can you think of any other scenario, any other time when you're going to need to go into the database and you're going to want to change the username and password?
When working on the website on your local server, you might use one database, but when actually building it on the server,
yep.
You may use another one.
Could be. What if 3 of you guys are working as a team, right? You develop an application together. So you all have access to the code, you all have access to the database. Jesse leaves and gets another job offer he can't turn down, so he leaves, right? Well, he's got access to the code, he still has access if he knows the username and password. So even if you trust him and you're still friends, you probably still want to change that credential, right? So whenever somebody who's had access to a site or database no longer is part of the development team, we should be changing the credential. And it happens, employees leave, people get fired, people have disagreements. When that happens, you need to change your database credential. So it's best if we have this stored in only one place in our code. So we don't have to go and change it on every page. So a very simple rule that one of my former students likes to talk about, he calls it DRY, which stands for do not repeat yourself. So we shouldn't have the same block of repeating code within an application. We want to put it in a separate file and link it or use a function. So it's easier to change, easier to maintain, easier to debug, more secure. So what we're going to do after our break is we're going to make a bunch of shared components. We're going to make a shared header and shared footer. And then we're going to move our database connection into a shared file, and we're going to move our authentication check also into a shared file. So we should be able to do all of this, I would hope, in the next hour. So then by the end of, by 4 o'clock, our application is going to start to look more like a real website where we can easily move around. And then the last thing we want to do, if we have time today, and if not, we can push it to next week, is we want to add some error handling. So when we do things like this, rather than getting this, we get an error page that's friendly and that has our header and footer and CSS and looks like the rest of our website. So let's take a break now. We'll come back at about 3:05 and we'll start with this.